Welcome to Music Student 101. It's come to our attention that we haven't had a proper discussion on reading music. It's probably a little overdue. This episode, part 1 of 2, will cover some tips and tricks to keep in mind while reading music or learning to read music. We will also muse on some reading experiences from your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips. So, let's get to it.
Oh, greetings to you, Matt.
Greetings to you, Jeremy. How's it going?
It's going good. And greetings to our listeners.
And greetings to our listeners, one and all.
I guess we can say Happy New Year, even though it's probably, we'll release this at the end of the month, but as far as,
we haven't said it since, so
yeah,
Happy New Year.
Then, so Happy New Year. This is episode 107.
107?
Yep. You know how I am about sevens and fours and
right.
my superstitions with those wonderful numbers. So I project this is going to be a fantastic, lucky episode.
Good.
Yeah.
Good to hear.
What's new with you, man?
Well, semester is back underway. Lots of teaching. Mm-hmm. Lots of prepping to teach, Lots of getting done teaching and then having to teach again. And that's what's going on these days. Busy schedule this time, so.
Rinse and repeat.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. That's pretty much it. That's what I've been doing. Christmas was kind of low key this year. Mm-hmm. Because it's still COVID times, sadly. And,
it is.
So things have been not straight up canceled the way they have been in recent years, but low key, small gathering type stuff, right? Yeah. So
same here, yeah.
Just hoping to make it through.
Yeah. Come out unscathed.
Come out unscathed would be ideal.
Right on, man. Well, what's going on with me?
Yeah, what's going on with you, Jeremy?
Unless you had anything else to say. I sensed a lull.
Dead air.
Dead air. We can't have dead air. Two really cool things, actually. There's 2 audiobooks that I've listened to. I guess that maybe I may not have mentioned on the last episode. One of them was Victor Wooten's The Music Lesson.
Oh, wow.
Victor Wooten, sensational bassist from Bella Fleck and the Flecktones.
One of the great bassists that makes most people's top 10 lists of bassists. Yeah,
I still maintain that stylistically, Les Claypool is one of my top bassists.
Yeah,
technically, Victor Wooten is certainly wow. I mean, just
he's something else.
But this book is actually, it's not just for the bassist, it's really just for any musician. And he gets a little bit metaphysical. He kind of goes out there a little bit,
Yeah.
But it all comes back to the main, each chapter he calls measure 1, measure 2, measure 3. And each one tackles the different elements of music, dynamics, timing, groove,
Right.
all that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, hey, speaking of metaphysical, so this will come as a surprise to absolutely no one, but I absolutely love it when philosophers or thinkers of any kind use music as a metaphor for a greater life philosophy. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I don't know if they're just knowing as much about music as I do, that just speaks to me more or what, but I feel like music can absolutely be a metaphor for life in so many ways.
Yeah, you're you're kind of trying to put off that final cadence as long as you can. the big 5/7 to 1.
Yeah. Well, I've recently been reading some stuff by a philosopher named Alan Watts, mm-hmm. who some of us may be familiar with. He was very popular in the 60s and 70s, and one of the people who sort of brought Buddhist and Zen Buddhist thinking to popular American culture in some ways. But one of the questions he poses is the point of music to get to the end of music? And this is a metaphor of life, right? Is the point of life to accomplish the end of life?
Yeah.
It's like a dancer doesn't dance with the goal of getting to the end of the dance. The musician doesn't play music with the goal of getting to the end of the music. If we did, then we would all play everything at the fastest tempo possible, right?
They actually enjoy it.
Yeah. And I read this and I think, well, there is actually some music theories that state rather specifically that the purpose of tonal harmony is to reach the perfect authentic cadence at the end of the composition, right? that is a direction-oriented set of musical parameters, and that the goal, therefore, is for those to resolve into, ultimately the final thing. Those theories notwithstanding, I think it is, I think it is fascinating. Is our goal of a progression to get to the end of the progression? Is a goal of the phrase to get to the end of the phrase? Because you can say no because you think, well, the goal is to enjoy it and all this, and yet if you don't get to the end of the phrase, it's like, is the goal of a story to get to the end of the story? Well, not necessarily, but if there's no end, the story just goes on and on forever, right? We don't like that.
You don't want to be a vampire.
Right.
You want to immortal, live forever.
Right, yeah.
I mean, yeah, you might think you would, but I can imagine that just getting really annoying and boring.
Yeah, which is why vampires are so emo, right? They're just so over it by the time they reach 180 that.
Okay, where's the next neck? Show me the next neck. Do it again, rinse and repeat. All right, moving on, man.
Moving on, but we could digress about that forever.
I also want to recommend real quick The Storyteller by Dave Grohl.
Okay.
And I want to say that both of these books, I don't have the attention span to read.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny. That's what we're going to be talking about today.
Attention span.
Yeah, but
in reading.
I listen to the audiobooks for these guys, and it's just so much more, for me, they're actually narrating them. Victor Wooten, Dave Grohl. And Dave Grohl uses so much profanity. I would never use that much profanity in my autobiography, but the way he does it and the way he punctuates the right words, you really feel like you're sitting there having a beer with him.
Right.
And he really does have some of the best stories. I cried, I laughed, I got the chills. I'm learning musicians usually have some pretty fantastic stories.
Yeah.
From being on the road and from meeting other musicians. And
music is metaphor for life. It's not something musicians talk about very much, but it actually is kind of an inspiring way to look at it. I mean, we've got to be doing this for some reason. It's not because we're getting paid millions of dollars.
No.
Something makes us do this. Yeah, and it's not being paid millions of dollars. Some musicians may think that, but I got bad news.
Well. Let's move on, shall we?
Let's indeed.
Because one thing that makes us continue to get down here is the new reviews.
Oh, we love new reviews.
We mentioned, we've talked to our friend Alex O'Hagan before. Alex O'Hagan was featured in one of our, past listener compositions episodes.
Correct, yeah.
And he gave us a nice review, but we just kind of mentioned it in passing. But hey, it's such a nice review. And he's still listening, and we want to give him a shout out.
Awesome. Well, let's do that.
Another fine composer. A shout out to his shout out.
A shout out to his shout out.
What's Alex got to say, Matt?
Okay, so Alex says, awesome content. He says, one-stop shop to everything music theory related. I actually remember this review.
Yeah.
Seriously, this is like a 4-year degree's worth of content. Maybe more by the time these guys are done. Yes, Alex, we have moved. We're moving into that realm now. We're moving into grad school stuff, actually. Yeah. If you're studying music theory on your own in a classroom, this is the perfect sidekick for your journey. The podcast starts from the very basic building blocks of music and then expands on these ideas outward into more complex and very interesting concepts. Also, the hosts are cool dudes who break this seemingly complex stuff down into language that we can all understand. Aw, you flatter us.
Indeed.
If you have ever read a theory textbook, you will understand why this isn't always the case.
Indeed.
And having read many,
Matt can testify.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the impetuses behind the podcast to begin with, right? Is this is some pretty complex stuff, and a lot of times you need somebody to say what they're saying is right.
Let's try and have an everyman's conversation about it. every person's conversation about it.
Make it a little less intimidating,
Yeah.
hopefully. Anyway, Alex continues. So if you want to listen to some funny banter and maybe learn a thing or two, check it out. P.S. Keep up the great work, Matt and Jeremy.
All right. Well, thanks, Alex.
Wonderful. I love the way he phrased that, too. If you want to listen to some funny banter and maybe learn a thing or two, that's pretty accurate. That's
In that order?
in that order, yeah. It's mostly funny banter, and you will occasionally learn something about music.
They may have gathered that by this point in the podcast,
Hopefully.
in the show.
Hopefully. Well, we have had reviews of people who don't like the banter. It has happened.
Not for everybody.
Right? We have had a couple of reviews of people say, get to the point,
To whom we would recommend a textbook.
to whom we would recommend a textbook, or an audio book, or many of the fine internet tutorials out there who do nothing but explain music. That's just kind of not where
Stop.
we're sitting, right, at this point in our lives, I guess.
We're not really capable of that.
We are. We just don't want to do that.
No.
I do that for a living.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. You're not going to do it here.
Yeah, I get up and stand up and lecture about music all the time. Well, I mean, I say that like I don't banter in class, but, that's not necessarily the case. But anyway, yeah, the banter's probably staying. Sorry if you don't like it. But
Well, shall we move on?
let's move on.
We digress.
Again,
We do. So we got a new Patreon patron.
lovely.
Patreon is how our listeners can support us and help us keep the lights on and keep us in coffee.
And everything else we need. What is that Patreon address again?
Patreon.com/musicstudent101. And you can just give us $1 a month if you want to. It's like a monthly kind of subscription. And you can get in there and see all the cool content that we have, the bonus episodes, videos, and so forth and so on.
Absolutely.
For $3, you can get yourself a little Music Student 101 coffee mug. And we'll talk about those in a minute.
Talk about the coffee mugs.
Long story short, stay on me about that, people. And also stay on me about for the $5 and up Patreon patrons, they get to request a special episode, which we will make into a Patreon episode and have it on the Patreon site. Or if it's broad enough, we'll put it up as an official Music Student 101
It has
episode.
happened. It has happened. But we will discuss for at least 15 minutes your music theory question specifically.
Indeed. Well, our Patreon patron today is a friend of ours named Adam Hayes out of Liverpool, UK.
Liverpool. Very musically famous place in the UK, right?
I'm not going to digress about the fact that I watched the Beatles documentary from Peter Jackson, all 8 hours or whatever.
It's amazing.
I will not. Did you see it?
I haven't seen all 8 hours yet, but I've seen the first maybe 3 or so.
Oh man, just to walk the streets that you walk, Adam. How amazing!
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. Adam says, "I've been listening to your podcast at my work, and I thought it was only right that I support something that I enjoy so much. I'm hugely passionate about my music." Oh God. Here I go. You see, I can't read. I told you.
That's actually a sign of intelligence, by the way, of high IQ and high reading comprehension. Because what's happening is your brain is capable of reading it faster than your mouth is saying it.
Yeah.
So that's actually
Well, let's go with that. That's my story, and I'm sticking by it. Okay. I'm hugely passionate about my music, and the ability to enrich my understanding through your podcast is phenomenal. I'm on episode 85, Augmented 6 Chords.
Oh, just getting to the good stuff.
Yeah. I'm 19 years old.
Wow.
And I'm currently working in a warehouse, but music has essentially enveloped my life and consumed my mind for the better, as I put it. I've been playing the piano for going on a decade and starting off with lessons, but going on to teach myself more and more and take the learning process into my own hands. I'm a huge video game nerd, and I absolutely love video game soundtracks, but I've been broadening my horizons as much as I can, going into other genres and learning what I can from them. I make piano and orchestral music primarily, and I got started joining theater groups and making soundtracks for theater groups.
Oh,
at
lovely.
19.
Yeah.
Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah, it's a lot further along than I was at 19, that's for sure.
Man, if you hear Adam's music, Adam actually, we might have ourselves another phenomenal listener composer.
Wonderful.
Hint, hint, Adam.
That would be great.
Adam is he's a self-proclaimed Dungeons and Dragons nerd. And in addition, he seems to be a sonic experimentalist. He was talking about attempting to compose in 432 hertz.
Right, because we had a podcast about that.
It was an interesting episode, to say the least.
Absolutely.
But he's also, he's also messing around with molding different piano sounds, messing with the parameters and molding different piano sounds. Just sonically, playing and molding sounds. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that brings to mind a composer, and I'm going to try to get his name right. Henry Cowell, that's who it was, who experimented with different ways of getting sounds out of the piano other than just striking the keys. He has a piece called The Banshee, where he reaches inside the piano and sort of he scratches the strings and plucks them and does different kinds of things without actually hitting the keys.
Yeah,
it's kind of a weird, cool little sound for a composition. But yeah.
Well, I've Adam shared a link to where you can listen to some of his music, and
excellent.
I listened and I loved it, and I'd say Adam is beyond his years in musical expression.
Wonderful,
in my opinion, anyways. And I'm sure that you and our listeners will agree once you finally hear it. If Adam is cool with that. We try not to do anything without permission. So Adam, we'll be in touch. And you can hear Adam's music actually at Adam Hayes. If you just go to Spotify, look up Adam Adam Hayes Hayes.
Wonderful,
you'll be very impressed. I think. Lovely piano stuff, piano work, a lot of it. Okay, moving on. Thanks again, Adam, so much for your Patreon patronage and for your engagement.
Thank you, Adam.
We have a listener mail.
And this is from Mark Petrovic.
Yeah.
From Petaluma, California.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark says, "Hi, gents. I love your podcast and have been binging on them over the last couple months. I learned so much from you, so thank you. I'm learning to play guitar, but I cannot read music easily."
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe we can help with that.
Mm-hmm.
I did not see any obvious episode on this subject, not counting the one on sight reading. Would you consider an episode on how to get started reading music? I know what most of the notation means and would love to hear a discussion of how to embark on gaining facility with reading music. Thank you. Well, today's your lucky day, Mark. I think we can absolutely accommodate this request.
Yes, in fact, I would say, Mark, you have inspired this episode. So I thank you. Matt thanks you. Our listeners thank you. Do we not?
We do.
So thanks again, Mark, and we really appreciate your engagement. People write in. I'm not always the best about getting back. If a month or so goes by and you haven't heard from me, then just know that it's probably drowned in my inbox. It's never bad to just hit me up again. Hey, Jeremy, have you heard from
Yeah,
did you get that last email?
Same here. I get, especially this time of year, I'm nuts, and I see emails that and I say, oh yeah, I'm going to sit down and write a good response to that when I have time, and then it just never happens. So yeah, just absolutely stay on me.
And I'll say the same thing about our mugs for the Patreon patrons. If you haven't gotten your mug, you've been with us for a couple of months, hit me up and be like, dude, where's the mug?
Dude, where's my mug?
I'll be, oh yes, it's in a pile in my room. I'll get right on that, because we have them. Okay. Anyways, yeah, man, y'all stay on me, and let's get on with the show, shall we, Matt?
Let's do that. So, reading music.
Okay, so here's what I think we can do here,
Would you
Matt.
consider yourself a good music reader?
Me?
Yes.
Not by any stretch.
Yeah.
I am 45 years old. I have a BA in music. I've been doing a music education podcast for the past 4 years.
And yet,
if you throw, say, for example, a Charlie Parker piece in front of me, I will run away with my tail between my legs.
Yeah. Same here. It's kind of funny. I don't know anyone who, outside of maybe, really professional performing concert pianists and things like that, they consider themselves good music readers. It's one of those things you can always be working on. I'm pretty good at looking at it and understanding what's going on. Sitting down and playing it, Ooh.
Because we should
Terrifying.
distinguish the difference between reading music and sight reading.
Right, yeah. And that distinction is, when you talk about sight reading, you're talking about someone putting a piece of music in front of you and you play it just as you would dictate words off a cue card or something, effectively, right? Whereas reading music is sort of more generally, I know what's going on, I know what this note is, I can play this melody kind of thing, right? Yeah.
Yes, and getting to the point where you can actually read music notation like you would words on a page is really kind of my dream.
Right.
But
Yep.
then again, I mean, I have not been reading music this whole time.
Right.
By
yeah.
necessity, by any stretch. I've not been an orchestral or even a jazz band performer or anyone
Right.
that has to really, you just give me those chord charts and I'll listen to the bass line and I'll replicate it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's kind of my thing. But now that I'm taking lessons from Taylor, I got a feeling I have some more of it ahead of me.
Oh, yes.
And that's another reason I wanted to get with someone who is skilled in that world.
And he certainly is.
Yeah. My bass teacher, for those of you who didn't hear the last. I'm realizing that because of the topic of this episode, reading music, there might be a lot of first-time listeners.
Quite possibly.
And if you stuck around through the banter and on the digressions,
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Welcome to the family.
we're actually going to talk about music now. So I think what we're going to do here is we're going to talk a little bit about tablature versus notation.
Right, because a lot of, especially when you're beginning on guitar or bass or something, what you're reading a lot of is tabs.
You'll
in
be
this
seeing
day
a lot
and
of
age.
that. And then maybe we'll talk about some of your ideas and experiences and some of my ideas and experiences reading music.
Absolutely.
And maybe some tricks and apps and insights we have on that.
Absolutely.
And then I found a pretty good article where they have 10 tips for reading music.
Wonderful.
And we can go through each of those and kind of discuss them and build on them or tear them apart. However we like to do it.
And I'm not afraid to tear stuff apart.
No, it's kind of fun when you do. Sometimes listeners don't hear all that stuff.
Jeremy edits out the worst of my rants.
But I'm laughing when I'm listening to
Which
them.
are reserved for music textbooks, incidentally. The worst of my rants are probably reserved for music textbooks.
Yeah, I've never heard you rag on a musician or
No.
a composer or a piece of music. I've heard you rag on how people analyze it.
Theorists now.
Theorists.
Yeah, theorists. That's
Just to be clear. Okay, so like you said, Matt, tablature is kind of a more base form of displaying how music works.
Yeah. So, I mean, what it is there's usually 6 lines representing the 6 strings of a guitar, or 4 lines representing the 4 strings of a bass, or the 4 strings of a mandolin, or whatever.
Each line being a string.
Right. And then there's numbers representing on those lines that represent the fret that you're supposed to fret. So those numbers happen in a sequence.
Yes.
And it's literally just sort of put your finger here now,
Yeah.
right? Kind of a thing. Put your fret this fret, and then fret this next fret on this string, and then so on and so forth, and you are playing a song.
And you can get by that process fairly quickly and find a sense of accomplishment pretty quickly.
Yeah. It particularly with songs that you already know, right? If you already kind of know the rhythm and have the tune in your head, then just using that little fingering chart to figure out how to finger it on your instrument happens pretty fast, and you can really get a lot of accomplishment and learn some music really quickly that way.
And we should also point out the lines as they are, as from bottom to top, they're kind of in order of how their distance from your face, right?
Right.
So the
yeah.
lowest string is going to be on the bottom,
Right.
and moving up.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, man, and you'll see a 0 if you're just playing the open string.
Right, and an open string is a 0. When I first started reading tab, I would see an 11 and thought that meant 2 1s.
Okay. So there's room for confusion.
There's some minor confusion. You figure it out eventually, but but yeah, it's and there's a lot of little a lot of little sort of makeshift direction in tablature. Like if there are 2 numbers with a slash between them, you're usually notating 2 guitars playing 2 different notes at that point or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Yeah. So there's some things like that go on.
There's some, yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, let's see here. Yeah, I guess one of the disadvantages of tablature is the fact that you don't really have rhythms pointed out. You're probably going to have a lead sheet over where it has all the words that or the melody. You might even have notation hanging over it sometimes.
You might. You see all kinds of different little things. Yeah, one of the big disadvantages is the lack of any kind of rhythmic direction, right?
Or dynamic for that matter, huh?
Or dynamic direction. You know, I mean, you'll see tabs where they try to put, you know, if the notes are 2/8 notes apart, they'll try to put them closer together than if they're 2 half notes apart. But even that sometimes isn't necessarily the case. And so you really do have to have heard the song before to have the best chance of reproducing it accurately.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, and again, you know, some tabs try to correct that. Some of them give little rhythmic stems, you know, underneath the numbers to try to say, okay, this is an 8th note and things, which is fine if you know what an 8th note is. You know, if you're just starting out, you haven't learned how to read actual music, you don't necessarily know that, you know. But and then again, a lot of them just don't have that.
Right.
You know?
But if you want to get right to playing music and you know the song and the rhythms and how the melody sounds, you can get through a few lines of tablature pretty fast.
Oh, absolutely. You know, if you just want to know, you know, I'd love to know how to play this Dave Matthews song, you know, just go get the tab. Like I'd love to know how the intro to Satellite or something, you know, just go get the tablature. If you know the song already and you just want to know how to play it, you know, I mean, the tab is there. There are actually subscription services. I'm subscribed to one of them where a $1 or $2 a month subscription will land you access to tablature for almost everything.
Aha. Do you know the name of that one?
I do tabs. I think guitar tabs.
Guitar tabs online, maybe?
Yeah, it's got the little gold G with the devil horns on it. Yeah, it's just called tabs.
Just tabs, huh? Yeah, I got that. Yeah, I see the G with the little horn. I got the same thing. Because now you're teaching, right? So you need to be able to access these things.
I'm teaching guitar and bass lessons these days. So yeah, now I need to have access to such things, and you know.
Now, if you want to recreate Beethoven, you might not can pull that off as easily with tablature.
You will absolutely not recreate Beethoven with tablature. No.
Or maybe you can reproduce the melody.
Reproduce the melody
with tablature.
Yeah, and I think I even once learned a guitar arrangement for "Ode to Joy" off of some tablature years ago.
Huh.
But you're never really going to. I've never seen anything approaching piano tablature. I don't think such a thing exists. I mean, how many lines for, you know, are you going to have 88 lines? Or like how would that even work? I don't.
Sorry, guys, you got to read notation.
If you want to play piano, you're going to have to learn to read notation. And I kind of think of it. I kind of think of it like this. Okay, I think of tablature. You remember those old movies in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, where there was always like there was a plane up in the air, right? And the pilot was dead or unconscious or something, right? And so then there's this normal Joe who was just on the plane, and he's in there talking to ground controllers like, we have no one to land the plane. And then so the tower gets this guy up there and sits down and says, okay, we're going to talk you through it, right? And he's always, by the end, he's always sweaty. He's taking his tie off, sitting there smoking a cigarette, talking this guy into landing the plane. And so he's going to say, okay, we're going to talk you through landing this plane. Push this lever. Okay, now do you see the switch above the green light? Okay, switch that to the left, and you know, it gives them all, and then pull back on the stick. Gives them all these controls, and they get the plane on the ground.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe it's not the prettiest landing, but the plane is on the ground.
Yeah.
Right? And everybody cheers. That's kind of what tablature is in my mind.
Interesting.
Put this finger here now. Now put this finger here. We are going to talk you through the pure mechanics of playing this song, and we'll get the song out of your instrument that way. Right?
Yeah.
So, you know, you'll get it out. You'll get that plane on the ground.
You'll come out alive.
You'll come out alive. But if you want to be a pilot, you know, if you want to land planes on a regular basis, right? What you need to know how to read is sheet music. You know? What you're going to want to know is not just mechanically what to do, but, you know, conceptually what's going on. And that involves reading sheet music.
Right on.
And listening to this podcast, but but also reading sheet music.
Certainly this episode.
Certainly this episode.
Matt, tell me about your journey in reading music.
Oh, wow. It's been a lifelong one.
Yeah.
So I guess I first started reading sheet music when I was 11 or 12 or so. I would sit with my grandmother at the piano, and she showed me some simple things, right? She showed me what a time signature was, and showed me what basic key signatures, not all of them, but, like C and F and G and B flat, all the rudimentary two sharps or flats ones.
The manageable ones.
The manageable ones, right, yeah. And what that meant. And, I learned some basic stuff there. When I was a kid, you could buy sheet music books, like you could buy Master of Puppets, the sheet music, right? And they would have the sheet music and the tab, right? So now they just have the tab. It's just, you kids and your shortcuts. but it'd have the sheet music, and then below that it would have the tab. So, I would sort of...
Or did Lars say, no, don't give him the sheet music. You just get the tabs.
Yeah.
We won't have that.
Yeah, it was a copyright issue. They got their lawyers on it, But yeah, so, I could read the tab, but then I would overcome some of the things with the tab. I could look up and see that they're playing 30-second notes or whatever, right? And so could sort of, so I had a basic understanding of that.
Okay, so by the time you're getting into Metallica in your early teens, I imagine, you had an idea of note values, rhythms.
An idea, yeah. I wouldn't say I was proficient or anything, but I had an idea of that symbology. When I got to college, it was do or die time, and I had to really learn very fast, the basic tenets of how this worked, and it was really eye opening for me in a lot of ways getting to college, because it became less of just an abstract concept and more applied. It was like, play this rhythm, right?
Yeah.
Don't just understand what the rhythm is,
right? Show me that you understand what this rhythm is.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, in theory classes, all the examples were in notation. All the examples in the textbooks are in notation.
Right.
Right. When you go to grad school and start reading theory papers, they have notation examples of what they're talking about in a particular passage of music or whatever. So it becomes just, a skill that you just sort of have, I guess. And it can always be better. It can always be better. To this day, I'm not happy with my ability to look at a piece of music and sight read it, but I can still practice on it and work it out. Even if I've never heard that piece of music before, right?
Yeah.
I know what the notes are. I know what the rhythmic values are. I know what the tempos are. I can figure it out.
You get a foggy idea of actually how the music works just by looking at a page of music, right? You can kind of almost hear the movement in your head, right?
Indeed, yeah.
Well, see, I'm not quite there yet, but I know that if you're I would think that by the time you've sat there and analyzed so much music and really dug in deep and had to place the notes in their names and what they do, that you'd have a better, you'd be able to read music quicker and more fluidly.
I analogize it to learning to read, when you were a kid, right? So, when you were in first grade, your teacher didn't slam War and Peace down in front of you and say, dig into that, right? I mean, you learned C spot run, run spot run, those kind of things. You learned dog and cat, and, you learn your alphabet, and you learn to read over time to the point where now if you look at the word cat, you don't go cat now, right? You just look at the word and go cat. You
visualize,
see it.
Visualize cat.
Yeah. Now, if you look at the word verisimilitude, that might challenge you more.
Yeah.
But just looking at the word cat, you can just, so it's kind of like that, you can look at, I don't know, A minor chord, and it's an A minor chord. You're not necessarily spelling it or trying to,
So what are some devices or some practicing methods or whatever you might have used to improve your reading? Or is it just exposure, submersion?
For me, it's really submersion and exposure. now, I guess if I had it to look back again, some of the things I wish I'd done, one of the things would be more patient with myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, don't expect to be able to read, immediately and perfectly every single time.
Mhm.
You know, don't expect to be able to sight read after you've learned to read a week ago, right? You know, understand that this is a process. Understand that it takes time. One of the best things I ever did was listen to music while following along with the score.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and it used to be. Is kind of hilarious. Some of our listeners are in music school, and I don't know how many of us are in grad school or planning to go. But one of the amusing things I remember from grad school is, and they say, "Okay, we're going to analyze this piece, but first we're going to listen to it." And they would, the professor would put the music down, and we'd all sort of gather around. You know, she checked it out from the library or something. So we'd all gather around this one, and nobody wanted to be sitting far right, because that was the person who, by consensus, was responsible for turning the page.
Turning the page, yeah.
Yeah. So they couldn't pretend to be following along. They had to actually be.
You gotta know where you're at.
Yeah.
You'll mess it up for everybody.
Yeah, because if you mess up, somebody's going to know. So nobody really wanted to be sitting on the right. And all of this went on tacitly, right? We didn't say, hey, I don't want to be on the right. Everybody just kind of was trying not to be.
Just kind of look down a little bit. Don't try to make eye contact with the professor.
Right, yeah. The poor person on the right. It was someone different every time. I definitely took my turn, but I remember when it was my turn, I was more worried about following the score than I was whatever concept we were trying to get out of this was lost on me. I was just all right. Here it comes. Okay.
Well, that was one advantage of being in the School of Music that all of our examples, we had a big thick textbook.
Yeah.
And filled with examples. And they all had an accompanying CD that we could listen to. Right. And actually listen to the music and actually be reading at some point the notes. It's going to start making more sense.
It is.
You know?
It is. And the more you can do that, the better it's going to be. The easier it's going to be. Mm-hmm. You know. And the sooner it'll start making sense, you know. Talking about I do that to this day just kind of for fun. I'm a nerd.
Yeah. Hey, but I'd say this, it's not all just the classical music and the theory stuff. I mean, just being in this band, Jenny's Mixtape, this 90s cover band.
Yeah.
I've been having to learn a lot of pretty cool bass lines.
Yeah.
And a lot of these videos, they'll have the person playing the bass or whatever instrument, and they'll have an accompanying notation.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes.
That's great.
And that's really helped me a lot because I already know the sound of the bass line, so I can actually read the music and it makes more sense.
Yeah.
All that is contributing to an overall impressions on my brain that hopefully will stick and it'll keep on picking up, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So you don't have to, all that to say, you don't have to be in a college atmosphere. You can.
No, not at all. Not at all. You can absolutely do, and that's a really good thing. And so you see the note and then see the place on your instrument where it.
Wow, the person is playing it.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll even have a little bouncy ball or something like that so you know exactly, or they'll highlight the notes as they're being played.
Yeah.
So you'll really know what's going on. So
wow.
So that's great, man. I see more and more of those, and I sure wish I had those when I was back in school. You know?
Yeah, YouTube didn't exist back in the dark ages.
No, not really. Not when we were doing that. We had internet.
We had it, yeah, but, to download a whole video, good grief, it would have taken like 2 hours.
Yeah.
On that old 56K modem.
Right.
I remember when modems went from 24K to 56K, and I was like, oh, wow. But,
We're flying.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Anything else you want to add to that, Matt?
Well, we're not really talking about the actual mechanics of reading music, what a quarter note is, what a half note is, what an eighth note is.
Well, I'm hoping that you should, if you are hearing this episode for the first time, you should go back and check out episode 3 was on rhythm.
Indeed, and in which we discuss some of those things.
And the website musicstudent101.com to accompany, because we actually show examples and you can see what these notes look like. We did do an episode on odd time signatures, but I don't know how detailed we got into the note values. We talked about weird time signatures, well, that was really cool.
Sure, right. But we talked about meter in some of the early episodes. I don't know if we ever talked about notation as in where the notes are.
A little bit. We talked about stuff you see on a score.
Yeah.
So go back and check out those episodes.
Right,
and look them up. You probably also want to see the one on key signatures.
Indeed.
I want to say episode 5 might have been major key signatures.
Yeah,
Episode 8 might have been minor.
We might ought to do one on clefs sometime, the treble clef and the bass clef and the alto clef. And
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Good one for next episode.
Yeah.
Notation reading part 2.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's see here. So as far as my reading is concerned, music was a part of my early education, like most people.
Mm-hmm.
We started off the Itsy Bitsy Spider and singing about ideas and things that we might otherwise need to memorize as little children.
Right, yep.
Brush your teeth. Da, 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 ba, ba, ba. This is the way, yeah. My mom was always singing to us, she'd always use that. But that's just my ears, right?
Right, yeah.
I grew up in the Catholic Church, so we would always be singing. And when I was paying attention, I was looking at the hymnals and just kind of following along. I guess just because everyone was singing and the notes were there, I just assumed everyone knew how to read music, right? But obviously, these people grew up reading every day and singing these songs every day. They knew the songs. But the notes were there. And if I really could have paid attention, and sometimes I was trying to see where they would rise and fall along with what people were singing.
Right, yeah.
So that's kind of my early childhood. And then, when I was in grammar school and high school, I took music courses and choir, just the stuff that they had you do.
Sure, yeah.
I might have taken choir because the girl I really dug was taking the choir or something like that. I can't remember why.
It happens.
Yeah.
It's high school.
It's high school. But I wasn't really challenged until college, like you're saying. Again, I was a garage punk.
Oh, yeah.
Surrounded by, band people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and not marching band people.
Marching band people who had been reading all through high school and probably before that,
Yeah, right.
Who could sight read.
Who had a real advantage on me, too, when I got into college.
Absolutely. So, yeah, man, nowadays, I always like to recount the story about when I was in my early 30s. To justify the amount of money I spent on this octave mandolin, I said, I'm going to make it a goal to learn to sight read or to read 100 pieces, just jigs and, 16-bar pieces and stuff like that.
Right, yeah.
But anyways, stuff like that. So I actually learned 100 pieces by reading notation in my early 30s.
Very nice.
To justify the money I spent on this instrument. So I did it. And I didn't feel like I was that much greater of a reader, But that was all just one genre. There's a very strict rhythmic patterns that go along with these pieces.
Yeah.
And once you learn the jig, the reel, the polka, they all have these same kind of, the hornpipe, they all have the same patterns that you're kind of used to. So
sure. Well, that's true in classical music, too, to an extent. There's some very familiar patterns and some very familiar sort of classical music stuff that happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, and and jazz, I think, is one place that doesn't quite do that as much, right? It kind of challenges you a bit more with syncopations, with accidentals.
Yeah, there's a fundamental logic to jazz, but it is a little it can be a little challenging rhythmically for those reasons, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But as far as what I'm doing now, again, taking some bass lessons with an accomplished jazz musician. Is helping me because I'm sure we're going to be. He's already got me learning. I learned "What a Wonderful World." I had to read that.
Did you learn the melody on the bass or just the chord changes?
I had the melody on the bass, and then he's got me doing his chords. He's found some really cool chords that he's using. So I'm actually doing his version, the one I talked about.
Oh wow!
So yeah. So anyways, So these days I have found some really great apps. Like I said, I've talked about Musician a lot. Musician is the kind of app where you can play on piano or guitar or whatever. And the notation is coming and scrolling, so you got to keep up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if I get down to that all the way through and miss that last note, well, I stop it right there and I go all the way back because I'm not going to get a 98%, right? I mean, I got 98%, but then if I stop it in the middle, that means it didn't happen, right?
Right.
But I mean, I could just look on my phone here. Let's see here. So as far as apps, we talked about a lot of these too. There's iNote Trainer, which is a good one.
Yep.
Nota. There's ear training apps that actually show you the notation.
Sure, yeah, plenty of those.
Push the note. You'll hear the first note. They'll play a second note. You got to tap it on this.
Right, yeah.
So again, there's lots of things like that, and then the YouTube videos. That's the kind of thing that I'm kind of using these days to really help. And then, of course, when we do an episode of Music Student 101, I'm going through the old textbooks, and that's when I really get challenged. But I mean, yeah, that's my personal experience.
Yeah.
And don't get discouraged hearing me say I'm 45 years old and being a mediocre sight reader again, because I have not been really developing this skill over the past 3 decades.
Right, yeah, and depending on what your path into music is, right? I mean, if your goal is to be an orchestral musician, you're going to need to be more than a mediocre sight reader, because that's very, very important to that job.
Probably a studio musician too. I know a lot of studio musicians can probably get by on chord charts and
chord charts and the Nashville number system and that kind of stuff.
But if they want a specific melody, you're
going to have to be good enough to come up with a melody when you see it, for sure. Yeah. Because that does happen.
And I thought that when I graduated, I thought that if this town was big enough to support studio musicians on the regular, that would have been a fun, cool thing to do.
Yeah, it probably wasn't when we graduated.
I'm not sure if it is now.
I don't think it is now either.
I mean, strictly studio musicians, right?
Strictly studio,
people are gigging and playing and recording all the time.
Yeah, it supports plenty of musicians. But strictly studio musicians, who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's kind of fun. I should mention that I have to learn how to play stuff to teach oral skills. And that's terrifying.
Yeah.
But
because you don't want to be fumbling all over the piano trying to teach something.
Not any more than I have to.
Not any more than you have to.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, right?
It's going to happen a little bit. The idea is to play well enough to get the idea of what you're trying to say across. And but that requires knowing sheet music, and so I do spend a lot of time learning little exercises.
Yeah, it's just really boils down to submersion, repetition, practice.
Indeed.
Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a lot of ways around that.
It's the only way to get good at anything.
Yeah. But we can share some tips.
We can indeed.
I found an article that has 10 tips for reading music.
Excellent. Let's take a look at these.
After reading them, I concurred with most of everything I saw.
Okay.
So maybe what we'll do is we'll kind of prattle out these tips and give our thoughts and feelings on them.
Sounds like a plan.
I found this. Let's see here. The source was musicnotes.com.
Mm-hmm.
Now, musicnotes.com is first and foremost a sheet music source.
Okay.
But they have some good articles and content. And their editors have apparently consulted with music professionals to come up with these 10 tips.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, I always get a little bit annoyed when you don't have an author, when they don't cite an author for an article. But some of these companies just...
we like to do our research.
I want to have someone to blame if I get...
Cite your sources. Come on.
Cite your sources. But anyways, so this is kind of divided into 2 parts. We have 5 tips that are pertaining to the daily preparations, just things you can do, exercises that you can do on a regular basis to overall boost your sight reading experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's things you do right before you actually start to read a piece of music. We'll have about 5 of those.
Excellent.
Okay. So without further ado, shall we?
Indeed.
Okay, so the first one is familiarize yourself with a variety of rhythms.
Mm-hmm.
The author says sight reading can look different based on whether you're an instrumentalist or a vocalist.
Absolutely.
But there's one thing both groups have in common is rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
And by rhythms, it looks like they're referring to meters like 4/4, 3/4, 6/8, 2/4.
Absolutely familiarize yourself with all of those.
And how do they mean sight reading can be different for vocalists and instrumentalists, Matt?
Well, believe it or not, the music can look different. So when you're an instrumentalist, notes are frequently beamed. By that, so if you see 2 eighth notes, rather than both of those eighth notes having 2 flags, there'll be a line at the bottom of their stems connecting them, right? What we call a beam.
Yeah.
And notes are usually grouped together in beat. So, like if you're in 4/4 and you've got 4 beats, 2 eighth notes, that's 1 beat. So that those 2 will be beamed together. 4 16th notes will be beamed together because that's a beat.
I see.
Right. And when you're a vocalist, usually they just stick with flags.
Huh.
Yeah.
Now that is interesting. Mm-hmm. Now that you mentioned it, when I think about the hymnals we used to read.
Yes.
Now that I think about it, they were all, each note had its own little flag.
Yep.
You wouldn't see them connected.
Yep.
Why is that?
I don't know. It's just one of those things that just happens. It's like, why do we paint eggs on Easter? Just paint your eggs.
Shut up and paint the eggs.
Shut up and paint your eggs.
I go find them.
Yeah, but no, I think it may have something to do with the words, so that, you may be singing different words and then it
syllables
or something. But that's honestly just a guess. I don't actually know why that is. I just know that it is, and so it can look different for that reason.
Good a guess as mine.
Yeah, but flags and beams mean the same thing in terms of notation. They represent divisions of the whole note, right? And we got into these in our rhythm episode way back. I think that's like episode 2 or 3 or something.
And I want to say, in a well enough written score, it's actually a lot of times you'll see that if you divide one measure into 4, if it's in 4/4, for example.
Assuming the most common meter there is 4/4 time.
We'll just talk whatever the top number of the measure is. If you divide that into that many sections, oftentimes the publisher will try and place them in the places of those beats.
That is, in fact, what they should do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a visually... So, like...
Not all the time.
So, like, if you're looking at a half note, which would be half that measure in 4/4, right? There's a lot of space after that half note where there's nothing.
Yeah.
Right? To symbolize that note is held.
Yeah.
Versus if you're doing 16th notes, they're all really close together, right? To symbolize that these notes are happening much faster.
They are visually busy. They are sonically busy.
Yeah, visually busy. And that is, in fact, what all publishers really do. If you had a half note and then right next to it a couple of eighth notes, that would look scrunched and strange and be difficult to read.
Yeah.
And be difficult to read. You almost have that visual sense of, I'm going to sustain this note for a little while, those little subconscious things.
There's a bit of an ergonomic flow that is kept in mind that I think we don't really appreciate or acknowledge a lot.
Yeah. And, when they say familiarize yourself, I feel like this is important. To me, familiarize yourself doesn't mean just understand conceptually what time signatures are. 3/4 is 3 beats and the quarter note gets a beat. 6/8 is, 6 eighth notes, which is an oversimplification for that to begin with.
It's a feel.
It doesn't mean just understand conceptually what they are. It means familiarize yourself. 6/8 is not just, a number of beats represented by a note value. 6/8 is ba da 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 da. That's a thing.
There's an accents involved.
Yeah, there's a feel. Familiarize yourself with that feel.
Yeah.
3/4 is ban da 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 da. There's a feel to that. It's not just a mathematical calculation.
Yeah, it's not just da 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 da.
Right. Yeah, and
that could be anything.
And it's not just 3/4 notes and then you see a vertical line, right? There's a feel. There's a musical intonation, a musical thing for which there's not a great word.
A character.
A character. Yeah. To all of it. Familiarize yourselves with those. When you see two 16th notes and an eighth note, that is a kind of musical character. That is one-eand.
Yeah, it's like a rhythmical theme, would you say?
Ba-da-da. Yeah. Ba-da-da, 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 ba-da-da. Yeah. Versus ba-da-da, da-da-da, 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 right? Which is different.
Still 3 notes, still all the same distance from each other.
Yeah, a dotted 8 and followed by a 16th dot, da-da, 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 da-da. There's a feel to that, a character to that. Familiarize yourself with that, not just the mathematical equation of how much of the measure these notes are occupying.
Very good point. It's not about the divisions. You wouldn't really know where the division is if you didn't have those accents, right?
Yeah, well, our brains aren't computers.
Right.
Really, and the beating of our hearts have more to do with how we perceive time than any of us realize, right? And there's rhythm there.
Yeah. It's ingrained, one might say.
Indeed.
It is biological.
Yeah.
Well, you want to move on to the next one, Matt?
Yes, do. So tip number 2, memorize key signatures. Let me say that again. Memorize key signatures. All of them.
Right into the mic so we can hear it.
Yeah, all of them. But there's so many. There's like 30. Yeah, all of them.
Yeah.
You're going to limit yourself if you don't know these. we covered this early on.
Yes.
We talked about major key signatures and minor key signatures. These were some of the first episodes we ever did, back when we still kind of felt awkward doing a podcast.
Yeah, right.
We talked about the major and minor key signatures, how they're derived.
Mnemonic
and
devices.
Mnemonic devices and all that kind of stuff to help you memorize key signatures. Definitely go back and take a look at that episode. Some quick and dirty tips real fast.
Yeah.
If it is a major key with sharps, the note following the last sharp will be the tonic of that major key. So, for example, if you see 3 sharps, and I can absolutely guarantee you that if you see 3 sharps, those sharps are going to be, what are they going to be?
Oh, we got to
F
think about
sharps.
the order of sharps, right?
Yeah, they're going to be F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp, right?
Because...
Fat cows get drunk after eating breakfast.
Or, Fat Charlie.
Goes downstairs or something like,
Fat Charlie goes down and eats breakfast. And then we had another listener, Rachel Dassa, recently remind us of a good one. Father Charles goes down and ends battle for the order of sharps.
Yeah.
And then you can reverse it. Battle ends and down goes Charlie, or something like that.
Oh, good one. Yeah. We used to collect, we used to ask for these from our listeners and collect them, and we should get back into that.
But if you know that, you'll know where the flat is, the third flat in this case, or the third sharp, I guess, in this case. Yeah. Fat Charlie goes. It's going to be a G sharp.
It's going to be a G sharp.
G sharp is the leading tone.
To A.
A.
So what we're saying here is that if you go out to that last sharp, G sharp, go a half step above that, and that's your major key signature, which is A major.
That will be the tonic of the major key that you're in.
If you're in A major. Now, if you're in F sharp minor, you just mess yourself all up.
We got a different one for minor keys.
Yeah. But if it is in a major key and it is a sharp major key, that means there's sharps in the key signature, that will work. If it's a major key with flats, the note a fifth above the last flat will be the tonic of that major key.
Okay.
Or you can go 1 flat back.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. So B flat, E flat, A flat, that is E flat.
So we have 3 flats, E flat, A flat, A flat. Because the order of flats is different than the order of sharps, right?
It's the order of sharps backwards.
Yes.
Yeah. B-E-A-D-G-C-F. Beadgisif.
Big Ed and Dan go camping frequently.
Is that good one?
Big Ed and. The third one is the A flat.
Yeah. So
you could either say go up a fifth from this A flat and you land at E flat.
Yep.
Or like you said,
just 1 flat back. The penultimate flat, the next to the last flat.
Very good.
Now the key with 1 flat is F. And you'll just have to memorize that. Right. You'll just have to remember that. And then for every subsequent flat, it is the next to last flat. So B flat and E flat, you're in B flat.
I like that. And
B flat, E flat, A flat, you're in E flat.
And again, this is all for major stuff so far.
So far, yeah. B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, you're in D flat. It is the next to the last one.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, those are easy.
And then what about minor keys?
So in minor keys, minor sharp keys, the note a major second below the last sharp will be the tonic of that minor key.
Okay.
So if we stick with that exact same example, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, the note a major second below that last sharp, G sharp, major second down is F sharp. That is your tonic. So we're in F sharp minor.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you see 4 sharps, F sharp, I can't remember my sharps.
Charlie
man.
goes down.
F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and D sharp. A major second below that is C sharp. So we're in the key of C sharp minor.
Yeah.
Eventually, if you see these enough, you're just going to remember them.
Sure.
Honestly, I say, the thing I said initially was memorize. I'd love to say that I sat down and in a room by myself at some point in my life and just memorized all these. But honestly, what happened is you just see enough of them and you remember. Yeah,
the way they're laid out on the notation and the patterns, they often kind of make a shape. There's like a specific shape to C sharp. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, they're laid out in specific ways. So they're laid out up, down, and stuff so that they always look the same.
Yeah.
There's not just a pile of sharps looking at you or anything. And so, you start to just sort of visually see and visually know and visually remember.
Oh, and we left out the minors for flat keys.
Yeah, the note a major third above the last flat be the tonic of that key. So if we
Of the
take the
minor
same
key.
example of that minor key, if it's a minor flat key, so that same example, B flat, E flat, A flat, the note above the major third above the A flat, that happens to be C. So we should be in C minor. And in fact, yes, C minor has 3 flats.
3 flats. We flat the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th.
Yep. You can think of it as a minor third below what the major key was. So if the major key was E flat, you can think of it as a minor third below that, which is actually C.
Oh, this is determining relative minors
Yeah, this
and
is the
majors.
relative minor. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of ways to determine and find out what the key signature is. Now,
Yep.
how do we say if something is in a major key or a minor key just by looking at the key signature?
You can't just
Alone?
by looking at the key signature alone.
Nah.
By looking at the key signature alone, you don't know that. You have to look at context. For example, is there a 5-1? Somewhere in the first few notes of the melody. If so, if you had 2 sharps and A to D, maybe we're in D major, right? If you saw 2 sharps and F sharp to B, maybe we're in B minor.
Yeah.
So you look for context. People tell you look at the first note or look at the last note, and that stuff's not reliable.
No.
You just have to look at the context of the music.
You could be in C major and the last note could be in A. Well, that could be a deceptive cadence. You know what
Sure.
I mean? That doesn't mean you're in A minor. That
Sure.
means you're in C major.
And depending on how complex the music is, music in C minor frequently modulates to E flat major, right? So music is a complex thing,
Yeah.
but it's a question of context,
Very good.
and you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Just play the notes, you'll figure it out.
Keep on doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. Tip number 3. And again, this is all stuff that you do, kind of daily little things you can do.
Daily little things that help.
Things
Yeah.
to keep in mind in general. Philosophies, even some of them.
Even. Yep.
Know your scales.
Should we say that one again?
Yeah, maybe so. Instrumentalists can get their major and minor scales into their muscle memory by learning and practicing these scales. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Matter of fact.
One might say it's essential.
Yeah.
The key signatures then can become tangible patterns and positions. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Vocalists tend to rely on singing the syllables of solfege or the numbers of the scale degrees to familiarize themselves with the intervals associated with these scales.
Right, because vocalists don't have finger patterns, right? So.
Yeah. So in some ways they are at a bit of a disadvantage. It's almost like they have to get used to the muscles in the position of their larynxes when they're singing these things.
Yeah.
And in some ways, maybe that helps their ear training a little better, being more intimately connected.
They frequently have an advantage when it comes to ear training because so much of how they play has ear training components.
How much they sing, the vocalists?
Yeah. How much they use their instrument is so closely tied with being able to hear what you're doing.
It's very melodic.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's pretty much all about that. The only thing I would add to that is try and show equal love to major and minor scales.
Show equal love to major and minor scales. And the only thing I would do is re-emphasize, practice your scales. Not once. Every day.
And not just one octave.
Not just one octave. No.
As many as your instrument will allow.
Yeah.
Your scales and your arpeggios.
Yeah. 2 octaves is generally considered respectable.
Yeah. I've never been challenged to do more than 2 octaves. Of course, I got a bass, I only have so many strings.
Yeah, there's
So many notes.
depending on what key you're talking about, you might only be able to get 2 octaves in there.
Yeah, you're right. Even on the piano, our class piano, we only had to do 2 octaves.
Yeah.
It sounded pretty smooth.
Yeah, there's a reason for that.
It sounded like you had your proper finger positioning.
Yeah, I hope.
Not a choke
I
up
hope.
at all.
I wonder if Miss Rust would have passed me on that.
So that's kind of cool. I think scales is a pretty big part of it in Western music and probably in other music.
Well, in other music, you're going to be practicing raga or whatever. But there's going to be something you have to practice. I promise.
An organization of notes
Yeah.
that give different expressions and feelings and emotions.
Yep. Okay, so number 4. Mm-hmm. I like this one. Practice without a safety net. An instrumentalist might look down at their hands while they attempt to sight read. A vocalist might use a piano to define those hard to read notes. Try to avoid this. I agree.
Why?
When you are practicing, these things can become such a crutch that it becomes very difficult for you to reproduce a musical performance without them. And then you're in a really bad place. Especially the example with pianist, vocalists going to the piano. You know, there are times when this is just not possible, right? And you know, you need to try to get to the point where that's not something that you're relying on. And the only way to get to that point is to not rely on it, is to stop rely on it.
Yes.
You know, try to not look at your hands. Try to, if you're a singer, try to sing the note where you think it is.
Before you play it on the piano.
Yeah, and see if you're right. And you'll make a mistake. That's why it's called practice.
Yeah.
You know, you'll make mistakes and you'll mess up. Keep practicing.
You'll feel bad about yourself.
Yeah. Just
okay.
keep practicing.
You'll feel better and better.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I kind of liken it to learning how to type. If you've ever had to learn how to type with the proper positions, whether you have the home keys that you put your fingers on.
Yep.
And really, if you want to sit there and read something and type it, you're not really looking at the keys. Ideally, you're getting to where you're typing while you're reading.
Yeah, it's a muscle memory.
And if you look down, when you look back up, you might have lost your place.
Yeah, you're done. Yeah.
Especially if the music is moving. Words on a page don't move in time like music does.
Yeah,
you
and
know
same
what I mean?
thing if you're reading a piece of music. If you look down at your hands and look up, you will easily not know exactly where you were anymore. Yeah.
And then once you fall off, oh boy, it's hard to get back on, especially when things are moving and happening. You're in time. You're on a timeline.
You are.
You can't rewind. You can't delete. You can't Command Z.
You just gotta get back on it.
Yeah.
Pick back up.
So we want to move on to the next one.
Yes.
Okay, so the next one is practice sight reading different types of music. Now I do like this one, and I'm going to assume that when they're saying different types of music, they're referring to different genres.
Yeah.
Or different.
Perhaps different instruments. Piano music versus guitar music versus you have to be able to play on that instrument, I suppose.
Well, you'll never know what you're going to be presented with, so it's good to have a well-rounded notion of the different genres in general.
Absolutely. Oh, yes.
I've noticed that different styles have different rhythmic and thematic conventions that are often surfaced with some regularity.
Sure.
What were some examples, Matt? Can you think of anything? We were kind of talking about this a second ago.
Of characteristics of certain styles. Let me think. Well, we mentioned, jazz is often syncopated.
Yeah.
And jazz is often 1, 4, and 5. And when it's not 1, 4, and 5, it's circle of fifths. Right? If you look at classical piano music is often divided into...
Oh, yeah. Blues is definitely a lot of 1 and 4, 5.
Blues is 1, 4, and 5.
Count on that. And the flat 3 and the flat 5, sometimes flat. The blue notes.
Yeah. When you get into classical music, you're dealing with the complex realization of the tonal harmony system, right? So you're going to have periods and double periods and counterpoint going on and things like that. Not a lot of rhythmic sophistication, right? The rhythms are typically straight compared to jazz or blues or something like that in those genres.
Right.
Same thing with rock and roll. The rhythms are comparatively straight and simple. But rock and roll can become very virtuosic in terms of guitar solos and fingerings and things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it can be about technical prowess as much as expression.
Well, I know after playing about 400 bluegrass pieces, I knew that my bass line was likely going to be bum 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 bum.
Yeah,
exactly. So there are some things that you can, like you said, characteristics, I guess you would say.
Yep.
Which can inform how you perform.
And should inform how you perform.
And how you read it, really, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Because now I know a 1-5 bass line when I see it. It's a very distinct pattern.
And you're going to recognize it.
Yeah, so I don't even have to worry about reading every note. I know the pattern.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Kind of like a group of words versus one word, or a group of letters that make one word.
Yeah, kind of like reading the word cat. You know the pattern.
Yeah. Not cat.
Cat, yeah.
Very cool, man. Well, now, so those are all things that you kind of daily things that you can do.
Yeah, daily things to help.
Now let's talk about some cool exercises to do or some cool practices you can get into right before you sit down to read the music.
When you've got the music in front of you and you're going to go read this piece of music. Okay.
Yeah.
So examine the piece you're sight reading. Man, getting students to do this, and it's so important. Before you start playing, try to mentally digest the piece in its entirety. Tap out the rhythms. Read through some of the notes. Envision yourself playing it. This is something I do. You know, look for page turns. I might even add to this. Look for things that are going to help you. If measures 5 and 6 are the same thing as measures 1 and 2, try to notice that.
Yeah.
Because that means just play it again, right? You know, so yeah, try to notice these patterns that might help you. Try to notice where some things that are going to be tricky are. Right, and so you know where the tricks and the pitfalls are before you jump in. You know, any of this stuff sort of mentally just take a second and sort of live with this piece before you start playing it.
That big swell, when you're walking into a concert, the orchestral concert or something like that. Oftentimes, what these people are doing is practicing their parts. It's a whole cacophony of people. Practicing their parts until the concertmaster comes out and gives them that one note. But when I looked, like when we were singing in choir and being backed by the orchestra, I was looking down, I would see Craig Holtgren playing the melody.
Running through the little, right before.
So what they were doing was they were going in and identifying all the challenging parts to make sure that they had them ready. Yeah, sure. They can knock out most of the things they probably see, but there might be one or two little weird parts that are like, oh, what's going on over here? Yeah. Yeah, people who are reading music on that level, they can knock out 90% of it just visually. But so, what they're doing is having a grasp on the last 10% that they may have wanted to look at before time. So, and I love what you say about repeating patterns because you can look at a piece of music, a whole page of music, and see a whole lot of little black dots and a whole lot of little weird, funny, squiggly things, and just get intimidated. Right. But if you realize that, hey, some of this stuff is actually repeating. Yeah. That takes off the measures of your worry. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. So, it'll add years back to your life to realize, just play it again. Bring that blood pressure down just a little bit. So yeah, that's an important thing to do. And my wife will testify that when I get something new and it's ready, it's time to start putting it together, I don't read. I really should read one through all the way through the end of the instructions, right? But no, I just get my hammer and my screwdriver and start stabbing things. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I just go one thing at a time, and probably miss something and have to go back and do it again. I'm a little bit guilty of that myself. I'm even guilty of not looking at the instructions at all. It's like, this is how hard is this? Look at this.
I'm a college professor, baby.
I got this, right?
Exactly. Me and my hubris, yeah. 3 degrees, how hard can it be to put together a grill? Well, it took 2 days to put together that flipping grill, so pretty hard.
That's 2 degrees more than me, and I share the same level of hubris, apparently. So it's a thing we do. We want to get right to it. We want
to jump in, dig in, get right at it, and it probably behooves us to at least look.
There's an art to preparation and everything you do. In cooking, the French have a word for it. It's really cool. I'm not going to try and say it. But there's an art to it and a purpose.
Right.
Okay, so moving on, shall we?
Yes.
Identify annotations in a piece. So music is so much more than pitches and rhythms, right?
Oh, yeah.
So try and look ahead and be prepared for tempos and meter changes and very important dynamic markers.
Yeah, and this can go back into what we were just saying about looking through it, spend some time living with it, not just the notes, but dynamic markings, how loud it is, tempo markings, how fast are we playing this?
And can I ask, can we define annotations in the music? Is that basically just all the little vibrato, glissando,
staccato dot, that kind of stuff.
Crescendos.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Anything that's outside from the notes and the staff.
Right.
Things that tell you how to play the notes.
Yep.
How fast, how quiet, how loud.
Yeah, all that stuff we talked about in that episode about stuff you see in the score.
That's what separates a collection of notes from music. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Ultimately, music is not an art of little black dots on a page.
No.
It just really is. It's an art of sound. Those black dots are directions directing you how to create the sound that was desired.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Totally. Yeah. So moving on.
Yes. make markings on the paper. I have noticed this when I have seen orchestras rehearsing. Their scores are marked up all over the place. They all have their little pencils, and they mark everything. What are they marking? Anything that can help them. Like, for example, they'll circle measures and draw arrows if it's the same measure, right?
Okay.
Or they'll write out. So if there's something they hear right before they're supposed to come in, they'll write out the little rhythm dots ahead of that. So when they hear that, they come in and they know those kind of things.
Little
right?
cues.
Little cues. Little things like play this that way. Professional music readers, their music is always marked up with little things that's going to help them. So
I feel like it would take a red marker for me to be able to really see the parts but you should probably use a pencil.
You should probably use a pencil because your idea might change.
Yeah,
right?
you might actually, once you nail something, you don't want to sit there and punish yourself with a red mark.
Yeah,
permanent.
Yeah, but it's a good little tip actually to mark up things that you want to draw your attention to while you're playing.
It's a great idea, and everyone knows now something I don't fool around with a lot, but I know tablets and smartphones have little overlay. Things where you can circle and...
You can circle stuff. Yeah, and that's good because for a while there, we kind of lost the ability to mark up his score because musicians are switching to reading music electronically now. You can buy those little pedals that you press and it turns the page.
Oh, isn't that glorious?
Yeah, so they're definitely switching more and more to reading music electronically rather than the old traditional paper.
All right, so we got another one here.
Yes, we got another one here.
Now this one is... This to me it sounds like a pipe dream. I'll just go ahead and say it.
Okay.
But the idea is that you sound out the whole piece in your head. So try to give a mental performance of the whole piece from start to finish. Hum if it's allowed in your location.
It's usually not. Humming is usually not allowed.
Yeah, right? Especially if you're in a classroom full of people.
Right.
But if you're just in a practice room, knock yourself out, right?
Right. Yeah, sure.
So you want to ask yourself some of the following questions. As you're doing this, where is the climax of the song? What are some ways, Matt, that someone might be able to identify a climax in a piece of music?
Depending on what instrument and what genre you're talking about. You might be looking for the highest note, or the loudest dynamic, or the section with the biggest flurry of activity, lots of 16th notes or something. In a well-written piece, often two or three of these little things you're looking for kind of come together, and that's what kind of makes the climax, right? The highest note, the loudest dynamic, the biggest flurry, all are in the same place, and that's so it becomes kind of obvious.
Yeah.
But those are some of the things you're looking for. If you're playing rock or jazz, there might not be a notable climax. We're kind of talking about classical music when we're talking about climax. If you're looking at an entire orchestra score, in which case you're a conductor, in which case I pray to God you already know how to read music.
Fake it till you make it.
Exactly. But the more instruments that are playing, the more climactic, quote unquote, the music is going to sound, right? If you have the orchestra score and if you're just like the third violinist, but you have the score, look at that place where where everybody is playing, because that is probably the climax.
Good point. Good point. Greater texture, often greater dynamics.
Yep.
Higher notes. Apex. Very cool. Very cool. Another thing you might want to look for when you're doing this, as you're overlooking the entire piece, try and identify the main melody.
Right.
Now, if you've never heard the piece before, I mean, one might assume the main melody might come fairly early in the piece. Maybe it repeats several times. Yeah,
maybe it repeats several times. Maybe it's the most melodic thing you hear. And how does something on the page look melodic? That can be tricky. And yet, you can see these phrases kind of happening, right? You can see this shape of the the kind of up and down shape of a good melody. Right?
Yeah. And is it crazy to say that it's a good bet to look in the upper voices for the melodic content, or
it depends.
Higher end instruments in general?
In general, yeah.
Isn't the tenor always the hero?
Yeah, and that's not
soprano
enough for
always
voice.
the princess?
Yeah.
So they're usually developing they're usually giving the.
I see what you mean. Yeah. They're kind of giving the main melody, but if you're playing in an orchestra,
There'll be a bassoon solo on occasion.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing Symphony Fantastique, you kind of hear that in the beginning. That's the main melody. That's the ID Feeks that is in the bass the first time you hear it.
Yeah.
So
interesting. So you can't really rely on that 100%, but I think it's a nice place to start looking.
It's always a great place to start. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Another thing you want to do is, like we talked about earlier, are there any patterns that are repeated throughout? Again,
yeah.
That's just a great.
Just play it again.
Smart thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Saves you stress.
Yeah.
Because you've learned it once, you can play it again.
Right.
And then, does this piece have definitive sections?
And most pieces of music will.
Wouldn't you say so? Like a section to B section, or
right? Yeah. Or a verse and a chorus.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Bridge.
Yeah. You might even want to take your pencil and as you're marking up your score, draw a little mark to say, okay, B section right here, right?
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Because you see it coming and then you're ready for that change up.
Exactly.
And even if you fall off the horse towards the end of the A section, you can get back on it at the top of the B section.
Absolutely. And, all of this advice is designed to sort of get you out of this mentality of thinking that what you have to do is say, okay, play the next note, play the next note, play the next note, play the next note, play the next note until you're out of notes.
Mm-hmm.
That is you're never going to make it through a piece of music without making a mistake that way. Right?
Just like life.
It's not, the idea is to get you to where you're looking at the whole of the piece of music as a piece of music.
Yeah.
And not just kind of have your blinders into play this note, then this note, then this note, then this note, then this note. That's what doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Good point. Now, this last one, Matt, this is always kind of a part of these kinds of articles. I feel like this is always an element of these articles.
The psychology element.
Yeah.
Yeah. Breathe.
Uh-huh.
Relax.
Uh-huh.
If you make a mistake, keep going. People make mistakes all the time.
Yes.
Sight reading is not going to be perfectly executed every time, no matter what, no matter how advanced you are.
Mm-hmm.
People make mistakes. People mess up. It happens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It happens. Perfection is not the goal. Don't focus on mistakes, especially during a performance. I would say don't focus on mistakes even during practice, but especially during a performance, don't focus on mistakes.
If you're focusing on them, you're fixing them. You're not dwelling on them, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're fixing them, not dwelling on them. Do not go back and correct mistakes during a performance. Ever.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Don't ever go backwards.
It just doesn't make sense, and it really kind of accents what you've done wrong in the first place.
It accents what you've done wrong in the first place. It ups the possibility that you're about to make a second mistake, which will up the possibility of a third, and we're headed towards crashing and burning at this point, right?
Can I tell you a ridiculous thing I do sometimes that sometimes works?
Yes.
It's actually worked more times than it hasn't. If I make a mistake, I might do it again.
The second time.
Hey, this is jazz, y'all.
So
y'all don't get
the mistake becomes an interpretation.
I meant to do it. And I'm showing you because I'm doing it again.
I meant to do that ought to be the mantra of every musician.
Yeah. Well, actually, Victor Wooten really goes into that. They spent a lot of time talking about forgiveness, and they even said stuff like, you just can't hit the wrong note. Now, it sounded like that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
But I disagree. You can hit the wrong note.
You can't hit the wrong note as in there is no wrong note.
Yeah, I guess so. If you really dig deep into it.
There are no wrong notes.
But if you want to stick with the genre and the song and the piece you're doing, there's right notes that you're supposed to play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And all that to say, just
at the top of the podcast, I mentioned Alan Watts. One of the other things he says was that, this idea that there's no such thing as right notes. You've only been told that there's no right notes. Play it wrong. Play it wrong and have fun. And I go, I can't follow you there, Alan. I can't follow you. I don't want to hit wrong notes.
Somewhat, a greater majority of the people making music together need to hit a majority of the notes right in order to have music, in my opinion.
As much as I agree, I do also understand the philosophy. What makes the note right? Quote unquote right.
Well, when you get into some serialism and things like that, there's no really patterns or anything to count on. No
in serialism, everything is exactly right. That's one place where you better hit the right note, or Boulez is going to yell at you.
Or the whole thing fell apart.
To people who thought it was together to begin with, it all fell apart at that point. But in like in John Cage's music, in Chant's music, yeah, there really is no wrong sound. Even John Cage's philosophy is something everybody should at least think about, even if you don't want to follow his philosophy in your own music making.
Sure,
It's something always worth thinking about. Why is a sound wrong? It's kind of like that thing. The difference between a flower and a weed is judgment. You judge it to be the wrong note. Well, why? What led you to judge that note was wrong? Is it because it wasn't the note that was written on the page? Well, music isn't an art of black dots on a page. We said that.
I feel like some of the greatest minds in music tend to be more forgiving with what defines music itself.
Beethoven himself said, "To play a wrong note is nothing. To play without passion is inexcusable."
Okay, this is making music versus playing dots on a page.
Yeah, and in my mind, that ties in with what Alan Watts said. Play it wrong and have fun. Is saying the same thing. I mean, while we can't really use this as an excuse to just play whatever note comes out, whenever and call that music, it is freeing to think that a wrong note is not necessarily a bad thing. And at any rate, even if you do think a wrong note is a bad thing, you still shouldn't be down on yourself for hitting one, because that's just is going to happen.
If I'm practicing and I screw up the same thing 3 or 4 times in a row, cursing begins. The cursing begins. So, and really I should just be like, Jeremy, you got this. Just do it again, do it again, do it again. But no, I'm human. I get pissed.
Yeah, you get frustrated.
Myself, yes.
Yeah, it's very easy to do. Very, very easy to do. And that frustration, there's great great video on YouTube of this poor guy. You may know the one I'm talking about, but he's trying to get this lick on the guitar, and he keeps messing up at the same spot every time. And he's doing time after time after time. The video is about like 10 minutes. And every time he's getting more frustrated and more frustrated. And then the frustration gives way into getting more and more angry. And he starts yelling and he starts cursing.
Yeah, I think I've seen that.
And by the end, he actually gets up and slings his guitar against something and it smashes it. He's so pissed off. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, right? Yeah. So, advice for people who feel like they may be going down that road. Breathe, relax, keep going. Let the mistakes happen. Mistakes happen, if you really are making the same mistake over and over, put it down. Put it down, go have some food, or get a cup of coffee or something, come back later.
Exactly. Sometimes you'll be surprised at how quickly you pick it back up.
Be amazed at how much that helps.
When you just when you get to a point where you just keep on making the same mistake over and over again, you get frustrated, you do it faster and faster and keep on falling down the stairs. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And this is great advice from this article too. Remember that by challenging your reading abilities and by making an error or two, you're improving your musical abilities just by sitting down to do it. By challenging your abilities, you are improving your abilities, right? The making mistakes is a sign that you're moving forward. Because if you're playing something that's so easy you never made any mistakes, you're not moving forward. Right?
Yeah.
You've got that, right?
I can play Mary Had a Little Lamb 20 times in a row, probably.
Probably, yeah.
And not mess it up. But how much have I grown while doing that?
You haven't. You haven't. You haven't. I can play Van Halen bass lines. And the number of mistakes will be minimal. But how much growing have I done?
Oh well, the easier bass lines, if you mess up, then it's really an excuse.
Then it's really knowledge. It is really obvious when you mess up. The easy ones, though, right?
Yeah, right when you think you got it all figured out.
Right when you think you got it all, yeah. And again, music is a metaphor of life. Yeah.
We are learning.
If you're not making mistakes in your life, if you're not uncomfortable in your life a little bit, are you growing?
Are you growing? Are you paying attention?
Are you paying attention? Yeah.
Or do you just think you're that great? You can't think you're that great,
The minute you think you're great, you're not.
I like that.
In music and in life. The minute you think you're the awesomest musician in the room, you are no longer the awesomest musician in the room.
And if you are, you're in the wrong room.
And if you are, you're in the wrong room.
Man, we got a lot of great little adages. And
This
quotes.
was fun.
Yeah. I like this episode.
Music philosophy.
Yeah.
We ought to do this more often.
Peppered with some reading advice.
Peppered with some reading advice, yeah. And maybe one day we'll get around to an episode where we talk about like clefs and notes and stuff, since we talked about rhythms fairly early on.
Yeah, gosh. And anything you guys think we might have left out at this point is always a good time to start letting us know, because
Absolutely. We will try to incorporate. Yeah. We try to be pretty thorough, but there's so much to talk about.
a lot of this stuff fits itself into a certain sequence, you know.
Right.
But then it's easy to overlook things like the treble clef.
Like the treble clef. Did
the
we
G
ever?
clef,
Yeah.
the F clef.
Did we ever explain what a treble clef was?
I don't know. That leaves room for a part 2, though, I guess.
Oops. Yeah. Have to do that. Got a next episode.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's not a lot to recap, really. I mean, it's just...
Not really. And I wouldn't know how we would recap it if we tried, so...
The idea is really just be patient with yourself. Practice. Sit down in front of it. There's a certain amount of things you can do. Examine the whole piece. Kind of take it all in. Get it. Take a little photographic,
Yep.
shot of it, in your head.
Yep. And know your theory. Memorize your key signatures. Know what rhythms are. Familiarize. Don't just know conceptually what they are. Familiarize yourself with the musicalness of them.
Yeah, where the accents come in. What separates 2 measures of 2/4 from 1 measure of 4/4.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What does?
Yeah. Food for thought.
Yeah.
All things that make you go into be a more critical reader.
And a more critical musician.
Hopefully more, yes. Yeah, so
There you go.
enjoy that. Dig that.
We'll see you next time.
We hope you enjoyed that discussion. On part 2 of the series, we will get into the notes and lines of the staff and the clef symbols that define them. Don't forget, you can support us at patreon.com/musicstudent101. You can find our merchandise by searching for Music Student 101 at redbubble.com. And as always, you can reach us at info@musicstudent101.com.